What's a conspiracy theory that you 1000% believe in?
That ancient civilizations on Earth were far more advanced than we're being told, and that one of them possibly even thrived before our oceans even existed. Stay with me. In the spring of 2013, a gentleman was sailing his yacht around the Azores Islands, an autonomous region of Portugal, when he discovered a large pyramid underwater. They would find that this architectural marvel was 60 feet tall and bigger around than a football field. So naturally, I had to dig deeper, and as I did, I kept seeing pictures of it circled on Google Earth. And of course, I had to go find it for myself. It's right here. But as I was checking it out, I thought to myself, well, where there's one, there's got to be more, right? Well, look right above it. 1, 2. 2 more pyramids. From there, it was over. I was up all night, scanning the entire ocean floor. And what I found absolutely blew my mind. That there were large clusters of what could be potential pyramids at the depths of the ocean all over the world. And I mean thousands of them. Check part 2 for more. Ancient advanced civilizations that existed before the oceans, part 2. Do you see it? As I was scanning the ocean floor the other night, I spotted this. So I zoomed in on it. To me, it looks just like the statues of giants from Easter Island. Then I spotted another face right next to it, surrounded by idols. Check them out. Look at that one's definitive. There's another one. But the most interesting part, the statues I found were just north of Hawaii, over 4,000 miles away from Easter Island. But I wanted more evidence, so I went back to Easter Island and checked around it. Notice these circular structures. A number of them, blurred out. And sure enough, blurred out, another one, another one, another one. They're a circular structure with a peak at the top. So I came to the conclusion that this civilization of people existed here and north of Hawaii. So I thought to myself, they had to travel to get there. What path did they take? Part 3. Ancient civilizations that existed before the oceans, part 3. So after coming to the conclusion that the same people that lived on Easter Island also lived north of Hawaii, I figured they must have traveled to get there. So I looked closely and look at this. The path heads west and north. Not only that, they actually had a path going from Easter Island back to South America. You can literally see the beaten path going to the land. Then I quickly noticed that looks like around the area of Peru. And that's when my light bulb just went off. If you didn't know this, Paracas, Peru is where Julio Tello in 1928 discovered over 300 elongated skulls on a desert peninsula. So I bet you know what I did next. Paracas, Peru. What a coincidence. Straight to it. The elongated skull people of Paracas, Peru were probably behind the pyramids and the large idols. Oh, and one last thing. Don't their statues kind of resemble something found on Mars? After locating what I believe are possible clusters of pyramids all over the ocean floor, I came to the conclusion that these beings must have existed either before the oceans or while they were very shallow. Either that or the land was highly elevated. So what completely submerged them? I do believe it was a great flood, but that it occurred thousands of years before the Bible states. According to the Bible, the Great Flood was 4,500 years ago, and creationism of Earth was 6,000 years ago. For example, scientists have dated present-day glacial ice to over 400,000 years ago. It was around this time that a nuclear war would ravage Earth. It would be the Atlanteans and the Lemurians, who I believe were the elongated skull beings, fighting against the ancient Anunnaki over the enslaving of humans to mine gold. And that at the pinnacle of the war, one of the parties, most likely the Anunnaki, would fire a large nuke known as Nara-1 down in the Mariana Trench. I speculate that when it exploded, it punctured the subterranean pockets full of fresh water. The ones they say have more fresh water than the oceans combined today. The result, a great flood. Then nuclear fallout, rain, ice age. After locating what I believe are possible clusters of pyramids all over the ocean floor, I came to the conclusion that these beings must have existed either before the oceans or while they were very shallow. Either that or the land was highly elevated. So what completely submerged them? I do believe it was a great flood, but that it occurred thousands of years before the Bible states. According to the Bible, the Great Flood was 4,500 years ago, and creationism of Earth was 6,000 years ago. For example, scientists have dated present-day glacial ice to over 400,000 years ago. It was around this time that a nuclear war would ravage Earth. It would be the Atlanteans and the Lemurians, who I believe were the elongated skull beings, fighting against the ancient Anunnaki over the enslaving of humans to mine gold. And that at the pinnacle of the war, one of the parties, most likely the Anunnaki, would fire a large nuke known as Nara-1 down in the Mariana Trench. I speculate that when it exploded, it punctured the subterranean pockets full of fresh water. The ones they say have more fresh water than the oceans combined today. The result, a great flood. Then nuclear fallout, rain, ice age. An underwater Area 51 that's built on the edge of the Bermuda Triangle and on top of Atlantis? You heard it here first at Night God 333. Navy Military Base Autec, the Atlantic Undersea Test and Evaluation Center. Autec is a laboratory that performs integrated three-dimensional hydrospace measurements for underwater warfare. It's located just off Azores Island in the Bahamas. But it is believed there's much more to this military base than meets the eye, with ex-employees and witnesses stating they've seen things in the water that are unexplainable. This could explain all the weird happenings in the Bermuda Triangle. It is said that Autec was built on one of the many ruins of Atlantis scattered throughout the world due to the cataclysms, and that if you build on any portion of what was Atlantis, you can travel through different dimensions. Yes, you heard me right. There's a military base practicing interdimensional travel as we speak. For more, check the next part. Underwater Area 51 continued. It is said that the Autec military base was built shortly after Eisenhower met with aliens. This is where they signed the Greada Treaty, allowing the aliens to continue to abduct us and use us for experiments as long as they took us back home. And in return, the aliens would give us their tech and teach us how to use it, which would advance us thousands of years. Shortly after this, in 1958, they chose the location of the Autec military base. This is just off the tongue of the ocean, one of the deepest points known to man. 1,000 fathoms, 6,000 feet. One former employee told a story of when he was working for the Coast Guard just before he got a job at Autec. He was traversing the water between Autec and the Coast Guard base when the radar showed an anomaly that shouldn't have been there. It was as big as a landmass, 1 to 3 miles wide, stood on the screen for 3 minutes. Then suddenly it just disappeared and they never saw it again. 3 for more. Underwater Area 51, Part 3. So per sources that worked at Autec, says that there's an underwater base that's massive, and that this base uses the ruins of Atlantis' energy to travel through time and space. These sources stated that anywhere in the world, Atlantis' ruins have this energy, and they can use it. So my belief is, and my theory is, that the Bermuda Triangle is actually located on Atlantis' ruins. And that the reason people disappear so much there is because once in a while, this energy is kicked on, and maybe it's Autec military base doing it. These scientists stated that Atlantis' ruins are located all over the world due to the cataclysms and many other worldly events. Because if you dig deep, there's actually many places like the Bermuda Triangle. So yes, we have been time traveling. Underwater Area 51 continued. David Malcolm, a former Autec employee, said he was recovering a torpedo after a test run. And as he was recovering this torpedo, he saw a very large cylinder-shaped craft emerge from the water. And this was in the military operations area, so Autec had to know about it. He figured it to be 2, maybe 3 football fields long, and it moved through the water in complete silence. Another former employee, Victor McMonigal, he was a remote viewer for the CIA in the Cold War era. For those of you that don't know, remote viewers can use their psychic ability to see events in another country or another place in time. He claimed that during one of his remote viewing sessions, he saw a Stargate at the underwater base, and then he proceeded to see a 3-fingered alien with a skin suit on, flying a craft underwater. Underwater Area 51 continued. So researcher and UFO buff Maximilian de Lafayette says that he's talked to scientists that worked at Autec, and he could not disclose their names because he said he would disappear. Says that Autec underwater base is a multi-dimensional, multi-parallel gateway, or Stargate. He says that this Stargate has been built on Atlantis' ruins so it can harvest the energy and travel through time. They do this using hydroplasma, and any piece of this hydroplasma from Atlantis is required to travel through time and dimensions. He says it's an alien hub for communication with humans. So often you'll see anomalies over the Bahamas. You'll see alien entities coming out of the water because this Autec base was built. Retired Navy SEAL stationed in Antarctica turns whistleblower, exposing the long-hidden truth that an alien civilization lives deep below the frozen tundra. The soldier requests that his identity remain hidden for the purposes of this interview. I'm going to refer to this retired soldier as Patriot 1, and he was stationed on the east side of Antarctica in the early 2000s. It was August 1st, 2003, when Patriot One's life would change forever. Early that morning, he and his colleague were dispatched to a particular location. They were told they needed to locate an anomaly using satellite imagery. On paper, it was a recon mission, but unofficially, they were supposed to meet a certain individual and then report back to camp. As they approached their destination, they noticed massive walls protruding from the ice. They soon discovered a large door almost 30 feet tall. Patriot One approached the door and laid his hand on it, and much to his astonishment, the door shifted back and then into the wall. As he entered, he recalls how beautiful the bright green lights were, but they could never find the source of them. After the massive door opens, the soldier steps in and immediately notices a wave of warmth. The cavern was sitting at a balmy 72 degrees. It was also lit up with bright fluorescent green lights. These lights they were never able to find the source of. Another thing that stood out were the hieroglyphics. He had never seen anything like them before. He even claimed them to look alien, otherworldly. Then he says after they gathered all the information available, they went back to camp. The only thing he didn't mention that I found peculiar was his meet with the individual. To me, he avoided that for a reason. At the end of the day, he didn't mention a scientist, he didn't mention anybody exploring, nothing. So this is just speculation, but I believe he met with an alien that day. It explains why the door opened so easily, and why they had an ample amount of time to look at the place. Check out this story from a Navy pilot next, part 3. In November of 1994, Navy pilot and engineer, call him Patriot 2, as he requested to remain anonymous during this interview, had to fly the scientific expedition team to West Antarctica to a place known as Marie Byrd Land. Admiral Byrd named the land after his wife during his first flight over the South Pole. After dropping the team off, Patriot 2 headed back to base. Everything ran smoothly for about 3 to 4 weeks, until one day the scientific team didn't radio in during their designated check-in time. Day 2 and no contact, Patriot 2 was ordered to fly back out to camp and check on them. Upon landing, Patriot 2 sends one of his men to make contact with the team. As he approached the camp, an eerie feeling sent chills up the soldier's spine. He quickly noticed that all their gear was still there, but nobody was in sight, almost like they vanished in thin air. Patriot 1 returned home knowing he did all he could. Then a week later, just as all hope was almost lost, they get a radio call from the team. Shortly after hearing from the scientific team that had been missing for a week, he had the plane off the ground and was on the way to pick him up. No sooner did he hit the runway and come to a complete stop, that the expedition team was running to the plane. They wasted no time climbing aboard. They were in such a hurry, they even left their gear behind. When 2 casually asked him about this, they all just stared at him blankly. Nobody said a word. Based on their reaction, Patriot 2 didn't ask any more questions. He just told his men to go get their gear and put it on the plane. After they were all loaded up, Patriot got them back in the air. Throughout the flight, the expedition team said nothing, complete silence. Even when 2 attempted to ask them what happened, they just look at him with this blank stare, in complete shock. They finally made it back to camp where the government had a separate private plane set up for the expedition team. This was the last time the Patriot would see them. It later leaked that they were abducted and brought deep within the caverns where they were interrogated for a week. Best story up next. U.S. military engineer with the highest ranking security clearance turns whistleblower claiming they went to war with gray aliens underground. Philip Snyder, a top-ranking military engineer at the time, was working as an explosive expert when he was helping the U.S. government build secret underground military bases in Dulce, New Mexico. And this is his story. It was the summer of 1979 when Snyder began working on the Dulce, New Mexico underground military base. Everything was going along smoothly until Snyder noticed something that began to bother him. He grew suspicious when he noticed a large amount of Green Berets and Special Forces showing up to the base. But as time went on, nothing happened, even though more Green Berets continued to show up. Until one hot summer day in 1979, when they sunk a shaft leading into the next subterranean level where they figured they could build another base. Little did he know that when the dust settled, his life would change forever. When Snyder finally regained his vision, he saw a 7-foot-tall ET. Upon entering the cavern, Mr. Snyder noticed a rancid smell the likes of which he'd never smelt before. As the smoke cleared and the smell got stronger, Mr. Snyder looked up, and to his astonishment, a gray alien stood 7.5 feet tall, towering over his head. Though he was in shock, his instincts were intact. Schneider grabbed his pistol, pulled it up, and began firing on the gray aliens. After taking out 2 of the 3 aliens, quickly the last gray pulled his pistol out and fired a plasma ray at Schneider, hitting him in the hand, causing the loss of 2 of his fingers. By this time, reinforcements had arrived. Mr. Schneider had had enough. He backed up behind his colleagues, and they continued to fight. The U.S. forces fought the Greys for the next couple hours, losing 60 men in total. On a positive note, Snyder was able to steal enough data that led to cloaking tech. After the incident, Snyder continued to expose the government. This led to his apparent suicide in '96, and the underground war still wages to this day. Upon entry, Snyder was able to snap this picture of a gray alien.